And good morning. We're live on YouTube. We want to bring on our Facebook pages as well. That's Atlanta Falcons on SI and Scott Kennedy Sports. Once we get those in and going, we will be off to go on the Falcons podcast on Monday. Chilly Monday. There's still snow all over the ground here in Atlanta. Welcome in, everybody. This is the Falcons podcast. It is after the wild card weekend that the Atlanta Falcons did not take part in for the 7th consecutive season, but they did finally make a change. For some reason, they left Black Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and went to Black Saturday, where they finally announced that they had fired defensive coordinator Jimmy Lake. This seemed inevitable as the season wore on, but for some reason, they decided they wanted to be last in making this announcement. And now we wonder who is going to be here. Who's going to be here for us today? Me, I'm your host, Scott Kennedy. I'm in Atlanta. Snow-covered Atlanta. Not really covered. There's more like piles of snow still in different places. There's still a bunch of snow in my front yard, though, for the last 3 days. Nick Kendall, he's in Seattle, so we're coast to coast with your football coverage. Nick, how are you doing this morning? Welcome back. Happy New Year, everybody.
Yeah, man. Welcome back. Indeed. It was a tumultuous drive back from Iowa back to Seattle. We had a GI illness crop up that hit me the first 2 days of the 4-day drive and the second 2 days for the wife and the kid, which if you ever had to make an emergency stop on the interstate in the middle of Wyoming or Montana and, spew out the window, I would give it 0 out of 10 stars. It's not great, but we made it. And I won't share any more of the details, but God bless, man. And apologize to the Airbnb toilets and whatever, because it was, I think it was norovirus, and my God, do not recommend. So happy to be here. And that we got in Thursday late afternoon, and I was like, maybe I'll do a show Friday morning. No way in hell. No way in hell.
There wasn't any reason to rush a show Friday. We could come back here, and all the news for us here at Falcons happened on Saturday. And like I said, I don't know what took them so long. I mean, Jimmy Lake was fired. The longer it wore on, the more you're like, they're not really going to keep him, are they? I don't know that any other coordinators are going to be canned after Jimmy Lake. It took so long. And also in that firing was Jay Rodgers, the defensive line coach, which makes sense. As you're watching this team, we said going in that the depth of the defensive line is probably the strength of this team. And then, I don't want to rehash everything bad we've talked about this defense, but it just seemed like all this defensive line did, they'd run 4 players, whether they sometimes would put in 3 down linemen, but for the middle of the season, while it was at its worst, was 2 down linemen and 2 edge rushers. That's a 2-man front. That's unheard of in the NFL on first down. And they would just try and push forward, basically get blocked, hold. It's like you're playing a 3-4, but you're blitzing guys. Like, just hold down your blockers. That's what it looked like they were doing. Well, that doesn't really work if you're not sending any extra pressure, or they're not running the ball and you're freeing up your linebackers and you're dropping 7 guys into coverage and opening up space from the line of scrimmage to the 20-yard line. It's just unbelievable. So before we get started on saying hello to the chat, I just want to say this. Whoever comes in, there's going to be people happy. There's going to be people unhappy. My overall thought on this, the bar was set so low schematically this season by Jimmy Lake, by the Atlanta Falcons, that whoever comes in will be better. I said it when you weren't here, Nick. I said, this is the worst coach defense I've ever watched. I don't watch every defense. Don't say this is the worst coach defense in history. No. My history. I watch a lot of football now, but this is the worst coach defense schematically I've ever watched. It can only get better. Now, does that mean the defense will automatically be better next year? No, not necessarily. Personnel-wise, things could change. This isn't the worst defense I ever watched. It's close. But it's the worst coach defense I've ever watched. Now, if Grady's gone, Onyemata's gone, and, they've got to refresh all of this, the young guys don't step up, you could have a big problem personnel-wise going into next season. Mm-hmm. But schematically, can only get better. That's my thoughts on that. Nick, want to say hello to some folks. That's why we go live every Monday and Wednesday at this time. Victor, he's in here nice and early. Says, good morning, guys. One thing I would like to understand about Kirk's contract. Let's get into Kirk Cousins here real quick. If we cut with the posts June 1st tag, but before the 2026 roster deadline, do we still owe him those $10 million in 2026?
I'm not sure the exact specifics of the details of every single Kirk Cousins contract, but I think that this is something where you can designate a 6-1 tag before 6-1, and that can save money that hits on later on. So let's say you have a bonus that kicks in April 1st, but you're using a June 1st designation. That's okay. It just means that that's locked in, and you can't touch that money before then. But if there's like a $10 million bonus for 2026 that kicks in before June 6th, you can still use the June 6th designation on the release. So you can save money that way.
Yeah.
Never
so
did that with
Victor,
Wilson.
the way I understand it, the way Nick's explaining it, and the way I understand it is, no, you wouldn't owe him that extra 10 because you're cutting him before, but you're designating it after. It's just like, you're kicking money down the road. It would be $65 million instead of $75 million. And basically, it would be the same cap hit as if he was on the roster for the full year, which is scheduled to be $40 million if he was on the roster. And then if you were to cut him next year, it's a $25 million cap hit. So kind of the same thing, whether he's there or not. And, again, with this case, it's like, well, the Falcons don't have anything to lose. If it's the same money, whether he's there or not, why wouldn't they just keep him? Because keeping somebody against their will after you signed him to be the starter, benched him, and won't give him a chance to compete for the starting position is bad business. That's really bad business. Agents talk, players talk. You do not want a disgruntled quarterback with an agent on your roster. It's bad business. So there might be. I've softened on this a little bit. Maybe I'm just, usually your first instinct's the right instinct, Nick. Is there enough? Because my first instinct is no way they're going to Russell Wilson this. He's going to veto any trade because it would hurt a team that he would go to, make them cut him, and then he'll sign as a free agent. That's my first instinct. Might there be enough demand in there to get something out of him, to get a little bit of a trade, a pick swap or something, some salary cap relief where Kirk would say, okay, I'll do that? Because he's got no incentive to help the Falcons out. None.
I think it's that.
By accepting a trade.
Yeah, I think Kirk has all the leverage here because he has the no trade clause on top of everything. So I don't see any way that Kirk throws the Falcons a bone and hurts whatever team he's going to by saying, you know what, they can give up some draft capital or eat a little bit of bigger contract for the trade. So I don't expect it to play out any other way than the June 1st designation, and then he's a free agent and gets to choose where he goes. And gets new guaranteed money on whatever contract, Scott, right? It's a little bonus of even more guaranteed money, even if it is the league minimum. I don't know if there's offsetting language.
Yeah, there is offset language, just like Russell Wilson. That's why Russ signed for $1.2 million, the league minimum, and that's why Kirk will do the same. And the Falcons will get that back on their. They'll get $1.2 million, or if a cost of living increase or whatever it is, $1.35 million. If that's the veteran league minimum, that's what they'll get back on their salary cap. That's what I expect to happen.
As far as you mentioned earlier, the contract he's going to cost, whether you keep him or not, the same. It's not just about 2026. It's about getting him off the books as soon as possible. So obviously, I see Marquise in here saying it's bad business to pay him to play for another team. Well, don't you want to have cap flexibility during Michael Penix's third and fourth and fifth year, right? Because if you're keeping him, you're just keep pushing that the obligation to pay him back. So you want him off the books.
Nick, in the third year, the cap dropped to $25 million anyway. That's what his cap number. He's supposed to escalate to $57 million, and then the dead cap goes to 25. So that was when he was going to get cut. Pretty much. That's why we always said it was a 2-year deal. Except it would have been $35 million because that extra $10 million kicks in.
Yeah.
So really, it comes down to: do you want to give him another $10 million? Do you want a disgruntled player on your roster? And as far as saying it's bad business to have him play for another team, it's bad business to have him $65 million, $90 million on your bench. It's all bad business. This was bad business. Mm-hmm. What's worse? Now you got to weigh your options.
Yeah, but
it's all bad. There are no good answers. It's all bad.
But by doing the designation and getting him now rather than being a backup, you're not hamstringing along the dead cap. It should be less still. In my understanding, it would still be less.
Well, what you could do then, if you kept him, you could take the $25 million for 25 and for 26 and 27 and spread that across 2 seasons. If you kept
I think I'd rather have it off the books and then have a fresh slate for 27, 28 when you still have Penix on a rookie, the cheat code rookie contract.
Bottom line, we expect Kirk Cousins to be off the roster by March 12th.
Yeah.
And have a $65 million dead cap hit spread across 2 seasons. That's
Absolutely.
the overwhelmingly expectations for this team.
And do we have any expectation of where Kirk might go? I mean, I know there's a lot of teams that need quarterbacks. It's a horrific quarterback draft class. Maybe the Raiders, maybe the Browns, somebody that's kind of not in on the top of the quarterback class. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Cousins is going to be playing for somebody next season. Now, granted, it's probably going to feel a little bit like Joe Flacco there at the end. It's like, man, this guy's kind of cooked. Maybe we can get a few games out of him here or there, but I don't know. It's not a good quarterback draft class, so there's going to be some demand on the free agency market.
Coming in with some super chats nice and early. Want to get to those as well. EB, he was in early. He says, does Antonio Pierce or Gerard Mayo interest you as defensive coordinator? What are your thoughts on that, Nick?
I mean, I think they'd both be interesting to bring in. I don't know. I didn't read the Athletic piece. Again, been very busy over here getting back to Seattle, but there was an interesting piece from, I think, the Athletic about Gerard Mayo and the discombobulated nature that was going on in Foxborough. Now, granted, that might be being released on the inside to kind of push him out the door because of the Vrabel stuff. I don't know. The Patriot stuff there's going to be time this offseason to dissect and actually see what's going on there. Antonio Pierce, I don't know. He seems like somebody who has a lot of love from his players. I don't know if he's exactly like a schematic savant or anything, but a lot of players really do like him. I always come back to this, Scott, and we're back in the coaching era here at Search because Falcons fell short of expectations. So we're looking for a new defensive coordinator, obviously. But it's not what you know. It's not what you've done, really. It's who do you know? When have you brushed elbows with these guys? And we talk about, Ulbrich in here. He was with Raheem Morris before. We talk Lou Renmio. I can never pronounce the name. But he coached with Bates for a number of years, of course. He'd be an interesting one. So I don't know if there's any connection or past brushing of the elbows between Pierce and Morris, but definitely I'd be interested.
And Dennis Allen.
That's another one that would make some sense in that it's not what you know, it's who you know. So yeah. I think that one's maybe a little less likely because I think the head coach is going to be given they're going to be working together more than the front office and the defensive coordinator. But sure, I mean, you can come in there and I know this guy, I can vouch for this guy. So that one makes some sense too.
Yeah, typically the head coach is allowed to hire his own staff, typically, but when has typical ever made sense in Atlanta? When Raheem, I don't think has ever said I. He doesn't say I very much. It's always we, whether it's, the little piggy all the way home. But it's always, we have come to this decision and we have benched this guy. And, there's very little. He doesn't take a lot of credit for one thing, but he doesn't take any of the blame either. So it's always we and us, which so be it. He's consistent with that. My concern on this, EB, Antonio Pierce, I think, is a good figurehead. I got to meet and work with him when he was out. And when I was out in California, he coached Long Beach Poly, which is a national powerhouse team. So they always had players. So I got to meet him when he was coaching there. Then he was a recruiting coordinator at Arizona State because he's charismatic as hell. He's never been a defensive coordinator. He was a linebackers coach, but he's never been a defensive coordinator. So that bothers me a little bit. And frankly, Mayo's the same way. These guys have both been head coaches, but they've never been defensive coordinators. So do they interest me? Yeah, I'm interested. Would they be my first choice? No. After the disaster that was Jimmy Lake, I want someone that's called plays in the NFL before. I want someone with a track record of calling defenses in the NFL because Jimmy Lake was an unmitigated disaster this year as a first-time defensive coordinator in the NFL. Terry says, I think the Falcons are close to being real contenders. And he also says, Happy New Year, gentlemen. Appreciate y'all. Thank you, Terry. We appreciate you. And it depends on when you say contenders. Contenders for what? Are they there for the NFC South? Yes, absolutely. They probably should have won it this year. 6-3, 2.5 game lead, and go 2-6 down the stretch. They should have won the division this year. When I look at the true elite teams of the NFL, let's just say, we're going to talk on Mile High Huddle next. We're going to go over there and we'll talk Broncos. But the Denver Broncos shellacked the Atlanta Falcons schematically. They were a better coach team, both sides of the ball, took advantage of everything. Denver could not match up man for man with Buffalo Bills. It really wasn't close. There's the $80-something million in dead cap reared its ugly head. Playmakers on both sides of the ball. You know, I look at the offense. I think the offense, Terry and Falcons fans, I think the offense is there. I think the offense is good enough to win you a lot of games, but the defense right now is so far behind that I don't think the defense makes you a true contender to beat Philly when it matters. You know, to go into Philly and beat them on a playoff game with everything on the line. To beat Detroit, to beat Minnesota right now is really good. I'm probably forgetting somebody. Who's a third team? I mean, the Rams, we'll see. But those are the elite on this. That's just this side. And then, you know, when we start talking about the Chiefs, yeah, we almost beat the Chiefs. I know, but regular season's different. It just is. Mm-hmm. You know, the everything ramps up. And can you beat a team when they're at their best? The Ravens, you're a mile off the Ravens. And then there's one more superpower team out there, probably the Bills. You know, I mentioned the Bills, but there's like, I feel like there's like 6 teams. We're a big tier away from those guys on the defensive side of the ball, competing with the top 6, 7, 8 teams in the NFL right now.
Yeah, you're probably multiple iterations of off seasons away from getting the defense going and everything. But you know what? You never know, too. A defense can be pretty volatile, and that's when you're as bad as the Falcons have been, that can maybe be an upswing for you as well. So we'll see. But yeah, I mean, the big thing right now is you hope that you have your quarterback. There's enough flashes with Penix that you can build around, and you can focus on the defense while not totally forgetting about the offense as well. But yeah, I mean, you're a ways away from those best teams right now. You just got to focus on winning the division, and the division is obtainable for sure. I mean, the Panthers all of a sudden look feisty, but they just gave up the most points in NFL history. I don't know if that's by game. I mean, the 17th game in there, week 18 might have fudged that a little bit, but Buccaneers have won it 4 years in a row. But I mean, Liam Cohen might be hired away. You might lose Godwin. I think Baker Mayfield's playing a little over his head right now. He's good, but I mean, I don't think he's like no doubt every year winning the division kind of guy. Not a superstar by any means, in my opinion. So the division is obtainable. That's got to be the goal. And honestly, I mean, you don't even have to have a top 10 defense. I think eventually you're aiming for that, obviously. But next year, if you can get from Falcons, what do you think they finished this year? 26th, 27th?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on where you look. You know, if you can cherry pick stats. There isn't anything that looks good.
No.
You know, it's bottom 5 in just about everything that matters, except I think they were around 26th in scoring this year, and they're like 19th in yards. You know, it's like, oh, but you know, that can be massaged to look different ways as well.
Yeah. I think the one thing that there was good stats for, and I don't even know if it held out, but giving up explosive pass plays was pretty good, but at the cost of like everything else. Yeah. So, you know, it's good if you have that, but you can't just be playing prevent defense the whole time. But the division is obtainable for sure. All the same, Panthers are on the upswing. They are going to be feisty. They're going to be everyone's darling next season. No doubt. I have no doubt about that. And when we're talking the preseason divisional previews, everybody's like, well, the Panthers, look how they close on the stretch. Bryce Young, you know, but you also have Michael Penix, and, you know, we'll see what happens year 2 in the defense. There's means to add talent here. And there should, again, come back to the defensive coordinator. You should just have a shot in the arm from competency, a new voice, because Lake, dead man walking. I know that. I think the reason it took so long is because the Falcons defense was statistically, categorically better coming out of the bye, Scott. They were
not by points. It wasn't.
Not by point. Okay, well, they looked like they were a better defense. You're getting pressure up front. I'd be curious what the EPA is and everything like that. But all the same, Lake gone. You had to have a change there. I'm also happy about the defensive line coach being gone as well, because obviously it's not been good enough there up front. And I know there's going to be a lot of talk in the chat, I'm sure, all off season, you know, we have to go with position X on the defense. Defense is bad enough, Scott. It literally is just take the best defensive guy available. Unless, I mean, if you have a wide receiver and offensive tackle ranked higher, I guess there's a conversation. But the odds of that happening in this class are slim to none, because everybody's looking for that. And there's not really good pickings in this class. So, but just best defensive guy.
Well, and when you're picking at 15, the line flattens out. You know, what I mean by that is there's an exponential curve in talent. When it comes, like the guys at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, they're significantly higher than a guy at 25, so to speak. You know,
and the pick value chart. It's just follow the pick trade value chart. It's exactly the same.
That's right. It's an exponential curve, meaning the difference between 1 and 10 could be a big difference. The difference between 40 and 50 might not be any difference at all. It flattens out. You know, for y'all that play Madden, number 1 could be a 95, 5 could be an 89 at 6 points. Well, there might not be 6 points that differentiate. Could be 79 to 73 on your talent scale from picks 50 to 150. So it flattens out. It's an exponential curve. So what we mean by that is, someone asked me on Monday, Nick, is there anything that could surprise you? Is there anything that would surprise you? Do you think the Falcons will surprise you again? I'm like, well, if I knew it was coming, it wouldn't be a surprise. And, you know, shame on me so many times, because the Falcons do things that don't make sense all the time. You know, it is surprising. They do things that's like, wait, what you're doing? What? That doesn't make any sense. Why are you doing that? And there's so many holes on the defensive side of the ball that it really, again, take your best player. If they got a linebacker, okay, well, that's a little bit high. You don't want to position a value at 15. Yeah, but if you get a difference maker at linebacker at 15, okay, if you think if he's that much better than everybody else, you need a linebacker. You need a defensive lineman. You need an edge. You need another corner. You need a Kyle Hamilton safety. You know, one of those guys. That's 15 is right around that range where you can get a Pro Bowl type safety. Yeah. Wide receiver. Not necessarily. You know, the only thing that would surprise me is, like, you know, let's say they re-sign. If they end up don't re-signing Dahlman, then no, it wouldn't surprise me if they went interior line. They went center at number 1. But no, they could go tackle. They could go wide receiver. They need the best prospect, and it would fit pretty much anywhere, especially depending on what they do with Caleb McGarry, with Grady Jarrett. Chris, I see you in there as well. Chris Walker over on Facebook. Good to see you, Chris. He says, I was worried they may not fire Jimmy Lake. Again, he should have been fired Sunday afternoon, Monday at the latest, and they waited a week. I don't know why. Honestly, I mean, it was any competent, again, there you go. There's your answer, Scott. Question asked, question answered. Organization, this guy's gone on Monday, for sure. Why does it take until Saturday afternoon? But does Grady return, or is he gone? I think, to a certain extent, I think it's going to be up to Grady Jarrett, Nick, because I don't see that he plays on the contract next year. It's almost I think it's an $18 million cap savings is the difference right now. When we talk about flexibility of contract, we look at the cap hit versus the dead cap hit. How much is he due to make against the cap, and how much does he make if he's gone, if you get rid of him? And the difference in that's when we talk about cap flexibility. It's a weird concept to Falcons fans, because they're usually upside down on their contracts. But it's like 20 and 2. So you save $18 million by moving on from Grady Jarrett.
Yeah.
I think he's going to be offered a reduction in pay, which, listen, we want to give you 20 over the next 2 years. That's 10 over the next 2. $10 million. We'll give you $20 million, make it a $2 million deal, or we're gonna have to let you go, and then it's up to Grady.
Yeah, I mean, it should be up to Grady regardless. He's been the heart and soul of this team and defense for a number of years, and if he wants to, finish out somewhere else, then God bless him. Especially with how the defense has played. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, they're gonna have to figure out something, reduce whatever the expenditure was on him this season, and I don't know. I picture him playing somewhere else next season. But it'll be up to Grady, and I hope fans will support him regardless of his decision, because he has been a hell of a player for the Falcons for a number of years.
I have no doubt the Atlanta. There isn't. If there's somebody in this chat that wants to blame Grady Jarrett for not taking a pay cut and leaving, just go ahead and leave. I can't imagine. We've got over 200 people watching right now. I don't think there's a soul that would blame Grady Jarrett. Listen, we need the cap flexibility, Grady. We're going to need to give you a pay cut, or we can give you the release. And if Grady says, I want the release, I want to go test free agency, and I want to pick my next team, there isn't a soul in here that should say anything other than good luck, Grady. We hope, go get a ring. We're rooting for you. Come back and we're going to put your jersey in the rafters. in the ring in a little bit. So, but if he decides to stick, great for him. Either way, Grady Jarrett has support of Falcons country, Falcons Nation. What do we call ourselves anyway? We've never really decided that. I just say Falcons fam.
Yeah.
We've never really been a Falcons country or Falcons Nation or Hoodats, ATLians. We don't have a designated like Broncos country.
The blank bunch.
No, he's Grady Jarrett's legacy is safe in Atlanta. That's for sure. Dirty Bird Nation is what Ark says. I like that one too. And JHC talking about bringing it back to the defensive coordinators. He says, yes, it must be a guy with experience. Now, the two guys on the thumbnail on here are former head coach Steve Wilks. He was a head coach for the Arizona Cardinals, and he did the interim stint with the Carolina Panthers and basically, saved their season, was 6-6. And frankly, I was a little surprised that he wasn't retained when they went and hired Frank Reich, which was an abject disaster in Carolina. Now, I'm not blaming Frank Reich on that. Again, we go to Kirk Cousins, say, why would anybody want Kirk Cousins? Because frankly, looking at the Bears, do you always blame the players for not succeeding with the Bears, or is it the Bears? That's kind of how people look at Atlanta, y'all. It's not necessarily the person or the player in Atlanta that failed. Atlanta fails a lot. Cleveland, same way. Okay. Oh, you stunk in Cleveland. Brother, a lot of guys stink in Cleveland. It happens. So Kirk Cousins might think, okay, a year removed from the Achilles, fresh start out of Atlanta, he could be a viable quarterback again. But Steve Wilks did a fantastic job in Carolina. He was a defensive assistant collecting some money from previous jobs with the Charlotte 49ers. He's available, and he was at Flowery Branch a lot this summer. He's the kind of guy I said should have been on staff all year anyway as a defensive consultant I said that more about the offense, honestly, because Raheem is the older guy that should be the defensive consultant, Nick. Mm. There should have been an old head kind of keeping an eye on things as the offensive side of the ball. So let me correct myself. But Steve Wilks is a guy, Nick, that could be high on the list here.
Yeah, Steve Wilks is interesting. I've seen the chat mention Brandon Staley a few times too. Dennis Allen. I can't remember if you and I talked about that already or if that was before the show, Scott. Also, you got some recently fired head coaches as well. I mean, as much as the game management stuff and the offensive stuff was ugly for this guy, but Eberflus had a pretty good defense out there with the Bears. He had a good job with the Colts as well. So again, it's probably going to come down to
Bears come down here, Nick.
What was that? You had plenty of
Bears. Every other Chicago Bear has come to Atlanta. Why not another one?
I mean, Eberflus did a heck of a job with the defense in Chicago overall. I mean, it was not the defense that kind of let them spiral. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, you mentioned Wilks, Brandon Staley. I think my gut would be Ulbrich, but we'll see on this one. I think the guy that's the most interesting is probably Lou Enriquez, just because of what he's done game matchup wise. I don't think it's his fault that the Bengals defense fell apart. They didn't hit on like any draft picks. Now you could argue there's some issues there with him with the development side of things. I think it's more of a talent evaluation / positional coach issue than defensive coordinator personally, but they're all interesting. And the last one we haven't mentioned on here, but I have always been a big fan of is Patrick Graham, who actually did a pretty darn good job with the Raiders defense this year, a defense that I thought was pretty devoid of talent, especially in the back seven. And obviously they have Crosby, but other than that, I mean, they've not done very well. And the Raiders actually had a pretty feisty defense this year overall. I think many predicted them to be one of the bottom 3 to 5 defenses, and they end up middle of the pack. They're a really aggressive defense as well. It's a lot of cover zero and man coverage on the back end. So I think Graham, he's worthy of a defensive coordinator spot out there again this cycle. It wasn't the Raiders defense that let them falter this season. So he's one I just wanted to give a shout out to.
Yeah, there's several good candidates. And again, the bar's been set so low, I expect schematically things to be better no matter what. Now can you, personnel-wise, will it be better or not? We'll see. You can definitely upgrade at linebacker, safety, and cornerback too, but you might take a step back on the defensive line, honestly. If you lose Onyemata and Grady Jarrett, There's no guarantee anybody's going to step in and be as good as they were. But again, they weren't good this year. They weren't good this year. Keith asked, did Justin Simmons play bad last year, or was it playing in Atlanta's defense? I think he played bad because of the positions he was put in by his defensive coordinator. He had a bad season too. I think there's two players that played better in 2024 than they did in 2023 across the entirety of the Atlanta defense. Two. I think it was AJ Terrell had a pretty good year, and Caden Ellis. That's it. Those are the only two that I would say were better in 2024 than they were in 2023. Everyone else was worse. Brother, that's coaching. That's schematic. That's not putting your guys in position to make a play. You can't tell me Matt Judon was cheeks and Justin Simmons was terrible and all these guys were bad. They didn't all get worse at once. Not all of them. Mm-hmm. No. Yeah. So, but JHC coming back in, appreciate you. Again with a super. Because the problem with this team is that Blank hires guys he likes instead of the best man for the job. Kraft hated Belichick. Yeah. Robert Kraft torpedoed Bill Belichick. That came out that, Belichick thought he had the job, thought he was going to be hired. Woke up that morning and thought he was going to be announced as Falcons head coach. Arthur Blank talked to Robert Kraft and said, don't trust him. He will not work well with others no matter what he says. He wants total control. Blank didn't want to give total control to him. He was, pleased with the front office. And then people who would be threatened, Rich McKay, by someone like Belichick coming in would then also say, we don't want this guy coming in. He's going to upset everything. And we like having our family atmosphere. Well, as I said, it's time for some people to start feeling uncomfortable in Flowery Branch. Terry Fontenot's press conference last Thursday, I did a Control-H and search on the transcript for the word comfortable. It came up 13 times. The word comfortable came up 13 times. Now, about 7 of them were from him, and 6 of them were from questions being asked back to him, from Mark Bradley, from Josh Kendall, D-Led, saying, wait, why are you comfortable? We're comfortable with where we are at the quarterback position. We're comfortable with where we are at the salary cap. We're comfortable taking on the cap hit of Kirk Cousins. You can be comfortable with it. Yeah, I'm comfortable with my options. I just wrecked my car, but I'm comfortable it's going to get me home. Yeah, but I just wrecked my car. That's not a good thing. No. So there's too much comfort level. So what JHC says is Blank hires a guy he likes to create the atmosphere. He's a hell of an employer. But competitively speaking, he's not the best owner. There's just not enough ruthlessness in him, Nick.
Yeah. Yeah, he's again, positive guy. Shout out to him. He's done a lot of good work in the community and whatnot. And shout out to him also, pulling the induct himself into his own Hall of Fame. That's great. I appreciate the move there, Mr. Arthur Blank. But I don't know. There's not a shrewdness. Sometimes I feel like he does the easy thing as well with the decisions here. Keeping Fontenot again, not the clean. I'm all about if you're going to fire one, fire both. A lot of times. Now, granted, easy for me to say. I said to do the same thing with George Payton, and now the Broncos look pretty good having kept him. So there's never a magic formula, right, to do all these things. But we'll see what happens. And I see also some people in the chat talking about bringing in Ryan Nielsen back. I think you could bring Nielsen back, but maybe not as a defensive coordinator. Maybe he's somebody, especially because, you talk about a bad defense this year, Scott. The Jags were horrific. The only one that was worse was the Panthers. But Nielsen maybe could be back in Atlanta, but it'd be too weird to do this. But if you brought in Dennis Allen, that's who he coached under, right? So maybe Dennis Allen, a new staff under him as well on the defensive side of the ball. Maybe that's something you could do in that case. But we'll see. I see also somebody, Joe01 says, what about Gus Bradley? I would want nothing to do with Gus Bradley. I appreciate him. Apparently he's a all-world person, nice guy. But with where defenses are at right now across the NFL, just playing a static cover 3 that Gus Bradley is known for is not a direction. That's a 2000. He's trying to run a 2010 defense in 2025. It's not creative enough. It doesn't push enough levers and create issues up front. So maybe Allen and bringing in Nielsen. I don't know. We'll see. You're going to have options. And as you said, Scott, the main point, and I'm 100% with you, it is going to be nearly impossible to be worse. Nearly impossible. And
people coming in saying Arnold Ebiketie as far as, okay, the third guy that was better this year. I thought of him. I don't add him to that category. Okay. AK was absent, was missing in action for the first 11, 12 games of the season. 1 sack through, let's see. He had 1 sack through the Denver Broncos game. So that was week 12, I believe, finally. That was week 11. So then they had 6 more games after that. Had 1 sack through those, and then turned it on. So this is a little bit of recency bias, y'all. You know, they got it going a little bit, and he had 5 sacks in the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games. So he finished with 6 sacks. Last year he had 6 sacks. He had 12 quarterback hits. Last year he had 12 quarterback hits. So he was MIA the first, and I'm not blaming him. Don't get me wrong. I'm not blaming Justin Simmons either. I'm not blaming Grady Jarrett and David Onyemata. I blame Jimmy Lake for this. Y'all know this. So I'm not getting on Arnold Lebeketti. But he wasn't better this year than he was last year. He didn't take a big step up. He was good the last month of the season. He was the best football he's played for the Falcons was the last month of the season. I'll give you that. But 2024 was not better than 2023 on the whole. That's all I'm saying. And I don't blame AK for that. I don't. I think the scheme was absolute trash. I think the in-game adjustments and play calling and setups was the worst I've ever seen from the Atlanta Falcons. And I will stand by that. Again, this old Irishman, I keep grudges. The 2003 Auburn Tigers offense is the worst coached offense I've ever seen. That's 22 years ago. Still number 1, etched in the head. Right now, 2024 Atlanta Falcons defense. Jeff Ulbrich, talking about ties, who you know. He's also gone up to, since he took when Raheem Morris was promoted to interim coach in 2020, Jeff Ulbrich took over as his job as a defensive coordinator. When he left, when Arthur Smith came in 2021, Ulbrich went up to the Jets and took over he took the defensive coordinator job under Robert Saleh for the next 3 seasons. In those 3 seasons, he finished the New York Jets finished top 5 in scoring and total defense. But for this argument, I'm going to say total defense, top 5 3 times in a row while he was there, all 3 times. The Falcons since 1980 have finished top 10 in total defense 3 times and never in the top 5. I mean, statistically, that's mind-blowing anyway. That's like you should bass-ackwards luck your way into a top 5 at some point. But he had 3 top 5 finishes. The Falcons have never finished top 5 in 45 years. Ulbrich interests me. There's some stuff there that makes sense to me.
The one thing about Ulbrich is the Jets poured premium after premium resource into their defense. I mean, how many first-round picks are on their defensive line? I can think of at least 4 that they've used. I mean, they have had 4, and some of those were like not just early picks, Scott, but like elite, blue chip, top 5 picks. Because they had Leonard Williams there, I believe, at the beginning. Maybe they traded.
They went corner too. So they've done the opposite.
Yeah.
To a certain extent of what the Falcons did, where they put all of their resources into the defense the last 4 years. So here, let me hit on this. So this last year, Nick, they actually saw that they needed offense now, and they went OL, wide receiver, running back with their first 3 picks.
Mm-hmm.
But number 1 pick in 2023, Will McDonald, 15 overall. They did go with a number 10 overall pick with Garrett Wilson in 2022, but they also took Sauce. Yeah. Zach Wilson. So it wasn't all that. But they had, your point, they maybe already had.
Yes, you had Quinnen Williams there as well.
Quinnen Williams was 2019, so he was there 2 years.
But I'm just saying they were playing with a more stacked cupboard, not the resources as far as what they used when he was there, but what was already on the defense. That defense, the Falcons' defense, is so far away from those pieces. Personnel-wise, I mean, you also had, of course, Jermaine Johnson, who's been talented but injured. Up front, they spent a bleep ton of money on C.J. Mosley as well to come in there. And DJ Reed's been a good cornerback for them, too. Maybe that's somebody – I think he's a free agent. Maybe you bring in Ulbrich and you can pay DJ Reed to come over. That would be nice, I think at least. But I also am curious if the order of operations and the leadership there in the East Rutherford, is it – Ulbrich's defense, was he calling? I know he was the head coach and interim head coach, but was it more Saleh? I mean, where did exactly the play calling, game planning line up? But Ulbrich makes some sense. Again, yeah, he has experience with Morris and Atlanta and everything, so he'd be a fine coordinator overall. And it's always hard, right? Everybody wants superstar genius defensive coordinators, but I think, again, at the end of the day, it's Jimmy's and Joe's up front.
Yeah, I was actually surprised looking through their draft history. They haven't poured as much. It's pretty balanced. Mm-hmm. They haven't poured as much draft picks into their defense as I thought. Mm-hmm. I'll go their top 2 picks here for the last few years. OL wide receiver, defensive end O-line, cornerback wide receiver, quarterback O-line, offensive tackle wide receiver, defensive tackle, that's Quinnen Williams, who is a beast, linebacker, and that's all the way out to 2019. And then we're 7 years into this, Nick, because now we get back to Sam Darnold at quarterback in 2018. So they haven't totally unbalanced the way the Falcons have. I mean, the Falcons have totally unbalanced their draft picks for the offensive side of the ball the last 4 years. There's really not much argument there. With 4 straight skill guys in the top 10, it's been pretty unbalanced, the team building philosophy over the last 4 seasons. So now it's time to start pouring into that defense. Because offense is fairly set, at least the pieces are there that you expect. Michael Penix, the jury's still out on Michael Penix. The early returns are good, but you're not looking at quarterback. No. Curtis says, morning, everyone. Dennis Allen would be a good defensive coordinator. Yes, he would. And be interesting to know when you start doing that, how does he feel about the Saints being let go from the Saints? There's no better way to stick it back to the Saints than to come do a good job for the Atlanta Falcons. That's the easiest way to get your revenge on the Saints. Let's come to Atlanta.
Yeah. I mean, he'd be an interesting one for sure. I think he'd hire a pretty good staff. I'm curious to see what happens with Allen being fired if Denver's poaching some guys as well. The defensive staff was good. I mean, if Vance Joseph leaves, also, he's just got a request to be interviewed by the Raiders. So who knows? There's still a lot of movement that's going to happen. Guys are going to become available. And it's not just the defensive coordinator, but who they can fill in those other pieces around them. So it's not a complete reset, obviously, with Atlanta. It's probably still Raheem Morris's defense overall at the end of the day, which is the bigger concern. I hate to say that in Atlanta, but we'll see. But yeah, it's, again, I don't know, Scott, I keep coming back to it. You're going to get better there with the coordination second year, and they're going to obviously spend some resources, but you got work to do on the defensive side of the ball across the board. And you need to see some of these young guys that you've drafted here, not just first round picks. I know it's been lopsided first round, but your top 100 picks, you're drafting those round 2 and round 3 guys need to become starters. And you're hoping at least somebody become a plus starter. And it just has not been the case for this Falcons team. So I think I want to give a shout out to the draft dudes. Listen to their podcast, because when you drive 30 hours like I did, you have a lot of time for podcasts to keep awake, especially if there's moaning and upset stomachs in the back seat. But Kyle Krabs and Joe Mourinho talked about just all the picks the Falcons have used on the defensive front 7 and just how almost every single one has not been a hit to some extent. So they got to start not only hitting on those players, but developing them as well. So it's that combination of front office and the coaching staff just has not been a good formula in Atlanta on the defensive side of the ball.
Keith comes in with some stars over on Facebook, and he says, what are your thoughts on Robert Saleh? I think Saleh will have a pick of a job that is closer to competing with a more ready-made defense than what the Atlanta Falcons have.
He's going to San Francisco. I mean, I think that's pretty much a guarantee. They didn't fire their defensive coordinator this season, but they demoted him, and now they have a defensive coordinator opening. He's been seen in San Francisco. I know he's got a connection there with Kyle Shanahan. I mean, I would be shocked beyond belief if you didn't have Saleh going back to the San Francisco 49ers.
Real quick on this, DMAC. I've seen this a couple times talking about scheme. My thought on scheme is, one, schemes are multiple. So I don't think it's like, oh, this guy can only do this and this guy can only do that. I don't believe in that. I think people have tendencies. Sean Payton wants to throw the ball in the red zone. That's a tendency. Doesn't mean he can't run the ball in the red zone. That's a tendency. Dan Quinn will drop into coverage instead of put pressure on a quarterback when stuff is on the line. That drove me crazy. That's a tendency. It's not. So for me, I think scheme gets overblown here. But the second part of this, because DMAC says typical Falcons would bring in a 4-3 guy like Ulbrich, only to ask him to coach a 3-4. The other part of this for me is the Falcons don't have the personnel to dictate which coach you bring in based on scheme. They're not good enough. I don't look at the Falcons off defensive personnel and say, oh, we need this guy because we wouldn't want to upset meh. When they talk about their building blocks right now, they talk about 3 back 7 players. They talk about Caden Ellis. They talk about Jesse Bates. They talk about AJ Terrell. Sometimes they talk about Grady Jarrett, who is actually better in a 4-3 as a defensive tackle. But that's beside the point. Let's say Grady Jarrett moves on. You don't have the personnel to dictate, well, we need to run a 3-4 because, by God, Arnold Ebiketie and D'Angelo Malone are that freaking good. No. Zach Harrison. We're gonna base our defensive coordinator hire on Zach Harrison. No, you're not. You're going to go get the best guy. And so I don't believe in this hire for scheme type thing as far as trying to fit the personnel right now, because the personnel is not good enough to dictate scheme. Those are my thoughts on that.
Yeah. And also I think that the thought of 4-3-3-4 is a little outdated, personally, Scott. It's more about, are you 2-gapping or 1-gapping up front, and what is your predominant coverage? Enough teams are running hybrid. You're doing a little bit of everything up front with your personnel. It's not this static. We're playing 4-3 base, 3-4 base. You're living in nickel and sub. Again, you come back to tendencies. What's your coverage tendency? And are you looking again for more penetration style or reactive style defensive front? So again, I think the lines have really blurred on 3-4, 4-3. I think that's a little bit more Madden coded in terms of thinking about the defense. And no disrespect for the comment there. I mean, I think that it's a little different how personnel and a lot of people are viewing how defenses are deployed this day and age. It's more coverage and your style of front.
Gregory comes in. He says, that's why you consider Rex Ryan and bring in a nasty D. Greg, I agree with you. When you hear me say some people in Flowery Branch need to be a little bit more uncomfortable, this would do it. Rex Ryan would do it. He would put pressure on everybody. Not going to happen. Mm-hmm. Not going to happen while Arthur Blank is in charge. He doesn't want too many people upset. He doesn't want a hostile working environment. By God, the Atlanta Falcons could use some hostility. Not going to happen. It's just not. So hopefully you can find the right guy, and they're out there, that can come in and work within the structure that's in place. Mentioned Dennis Allen. Dennis Allen has some ties to this staff. Mentioned Jeff Ulbrich. He has some ties to this staff. Steve Wilkes has some ties. These are all qualified defensive coordinator candidates that have done a good job, have called defenses in the past, and have ties to the staff and would fit in with what's already there. Rex Ryan would be combustible. It'd be fun for us to cover. I don't necessarily. I might want it for a year. That's all it would last. It would. You'd either have. Talk about high risk, high reward. If Rex Ryan came in, you're either going to the NFC Championship game or you're 2-15.
Yeah, it'll be frustrating. Just before we get on out of here, Scott, I did just want to toss out the names right now. Again, I know a lot of people at some point we're going to be. It's just the nature of fandom. I think you're going to be laser focused on a singular position or player. It's January. You want to be open-minded right now, and you're picking 15 overall. So I can tell you the guys, barring medicals or something happening off the field, that guys won't be there. The top 2 players in this class are both defensive guys, and there's no way in hell they should fall out of the top 4 in Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter. I've been sending you Abdul Carter stuff since a year ago, Scott, and I don't know if you watched the semifinals, but my God, if you had a chance to get Abdul Carter, he should go number 1. I mean, he's the best player in this class, in my opinion. No disrespect to Travis Hunter, but when you put in positional value, he's an elite pass rusher. Those guys will be gone. I also expect I'd be pretty shocked if Mason Graham, defensive tackle from Georgia, is there, or Will Johnson, cornerback from Michigan, although he was injured this season. That year line started to get a little bird. So he's one right now, Will Johnson, cornerback, Michigan. If he's there, I mean, God bless, take him. I know it's a safety, it's a devalue position, but Malachi Starks at Georgia is so talented. He has to be part of the conversation. Jalen Walker from Georgia, he's a linebacker, but his best reps are as a pass rusher, Scott. I know he's a little bit small, but dude's got juice. It is the closing speed and whatnot. I think I don't even care. Give me that guy on the defensive front and you'll figure it out. deserves a shout out there. And Michael Williams from Georgia, a little bit stiff, but interesting. Shamar Stewart plays looks like Tarzan, plays like Jane. Kenneth Grant from Michigan's a big guy. Interesting as well. It's a weird spot for the Falcons. I mean, as lame as it is right now, Scott, I think that, 15 overall, you want a difference maker. But I also want somebody who's like a glass eater and like pissed off. I want to build a Dan Campbell defense. 15 is too early, but like my dream for the Falcons right now is to like trade down, obviously, get more picks. Classic. You got to fill out a new defense, do that. And pick 30 overall and get Jack Sawyer in here. I know he's not a spectacular defensive player, but his floor is so high, and this defense just needs culture and toughness and anger and intensity on it. They're so passive. You need guys who are just a-holes on the defense, and he's an a-hole. So I mean, 15's too early, but that's kind of my dream if those top guys don't fall.
Yeah, it's funny on this was Ark coming in. He says Rex would struggle against Mahomes and Lamar. Well, one, who doesn't? But two, that would be nice. That's a step up. I don't want to struggle. I don't want to give up 5 touchdowns to Bryce Young. I don't want to give up 4 touchdowns to rookie Bo Nix. I don't want to make Cooper Rush look like an NFL franchise guy, or Baker Mayfield coming out there and looking like the number 1 overall pick after struggling here and there, or Geno Smith coming in and dicing you. We make everybody look good in Atlanta. If you struggle against a couple of MVPs, so be it. So be it. That would be a nice way to go. On that note, we're going to hop out of here. I want to say
thank you. I have one more player I have to give a shout out to him. I see it in the comments here. I knew I was missing somebody. Walter Nolan, Ole Miss defensive tackle. He's going to be down there at the Senior Bowl. Great Senior Bowl, Scott. You should be just over the moon excited for that. But yeah, I see Stephen Ramey in here. Walter Nolan, I watched him last night just because, getting over the Broncos domination. And Nolan is a guy who should go top 15. You watch the juice and it's like, okay, yep, exactly. But we used early picks on defensive tackle last year. And where are they? Right now, draft good players. So I think he deserves a shot.
Rook looks good, but Brandon Dorlus, there's no guarantee that he's going to be a starter. So yeah, and you could use another one. Let's get a 3-man rotation. So that's fine. Again, you could be without Onyemata and Grady Jarrett next year. You've got 2 guys in the pipeline in Rook and Dorlus. That's good. Add to it. There isn't anywhere you could go on the defense with a good player that wouldn't play. There just isn't. If you got a star on the defense, where's he going to play? Anywhere. Because it's like, well, he's not going to beat out Jesse Bates. That's okay. I got an opening at the other safety. AJ Terrell's locked in. Yeah, we play more than one corner. We play more than one defensive tackle. We play more than one linebacker. So all good. On that, I want to say thanks again, everybody, especially our Super Chat superstars that came in. Edward, Terry a couple times, JHC a couple times, Curtis, and Keith, thank you for helping to keep the lights on. I'm glad I didn't hit the mute button today. It's good to have someone here to say, hey, dumbass, you muted yourself. So, at least that I can hear and tell how to scroll down. Someone did tell me that last week, and it took me a little bit to get to it. So thank you, everybody. And Troy, I agree. I like how Rook looks. Rook looks good. I think he's a starter in this league. Feel good there. I agree. But that's just one guy, and you need depth. You need 4. You need at least 4 defensive tackles. We will come back. First Broncos for breakfast of the year. And we are heading over to youtube.com/milehuddle to talk Broncos end of season review next. We will be back on Wednesday, 8:35 Eastern, to see what kind of news we have on the defensive coordinator front, free agents, et cetera, et cetera. So until then, thanks for being here, everybody, and y'all have a great rest of your week.
Peace.